Welcome to Mythic Albion, a journey through Britain's folklore, legends and sacred landscapes. I'm your host Tom, and today we take a short trip back to Suffolk, this time to its quiet woods not more than 45 years ago, where an eerie landscape and forest whisper stories. One story lies deeper than most, the Rendlesham Forest Incident. Often coined the British Roswell, and with good reason, events unfolded in late December 1980 when US Air Force officers walked into an English forest and were never the same again. What they saw invites more questions rather than clarity. One man claiming to have a close encounter with an unidentified craft, a senior officer turning on a tape recorder, and what he recorded was never meant for the public. Confusion, moving lights, and a beam from the sky. What would you do if the sky came down to meet the forest? Not as a rumour, not as a story, but as something you could see, something you could follow, something you could even touch. Rendlesham Forest is situated between two military bases of RAF Woodbridge and RAF Bentwaters. The forest had long been home to many a local folklore, but in 1980 it became the epicentre of what many believed to be one of the most compelling accounts of genuine extraterrestrial encounters. It all began in the early hours of December 26, Boxing Day. Case 1. The First Night. Just after midnight on December 26, 1980, Rendlesham Forest was quiet. Quiet even for a forest in the middle of the night. RAF Woodbridge slept beneath a cold sky, its runways dark and its perimeter still. For the security detail on patrol, this was meant to be the easiest shift of the year, and then the black sky above them lit up. Airman First Class John Burrows and Airman First Class Edgar Banasang were doing a routine security patrol near the eastern edge of the base when they saw something very peculiar and very odd. Strange lights moving through the trees in the forest, lights that descended into the tree canopy, but in complete silence. Their first assumption was a downed plane and a potential crash into the forest. It was their job and duty to investigate. They called it in. Within minutes their supervisor was alerted, Staff Sergeant Jim Penniston. 2 miles out from the base, Penniston joined them near the forest edge where the 4th Airman left at the Woodbridge East Gate to keep guard. The lights were still visible, pulsing and shifting but never quite steady. Together the three men entered Rendlesham Forest. The deeper they went in, the stranger events became. The air felt static, electrically charged, but there was no indication of an oncoming storm, just an empty, unanswering space above them. Movement became difficult, sluggish, as if they were wading through water. Burrows described hearing the livestock of a nearby farm sound agitated, almost frenzied, and seeing the pulse of a red and blue light near that direction. Time itself seemed to be turning on its head. And then they saw it. Something glowing in a clearing like a supernova. Of the three men, it was Penniston that strode forward, feeling time and space around him getting denser, and then it dissipated. And there was a craft, a triangular craft. Later he said the following: I estimate it to be about 3 meters tall and about 3 meters wide at the base. No landing gear was apparent, but it seemed like she was on fixed legs. I moved a little closer. I walked around the craft and finally I walked right up to the craft. I noticed the fabric of the shell was like a smooth opaque black glass. Penniston observed that when he looked around at his two fellow servicemen, that they were still, almost perfectly still, as if locked momentarily in time. Noting strange hieroglyphs on the craft, not letters or numbers, something that looked ancient or completely alien. Something entirely unknown. The craft was pulsating with colour, rhythmically like a chameleon trying to find the right camouflage. A vibrant display of white and alternating hues of red and blue. Penniston moved closer. From Burroughs' point of view, all he could see was blinding lights, overwhelming. He felt intense pressure in his head. Gabanasang erring on the side of caution, remaining nearer the patrol vehicle. Penniston reached out and traced his fingers over the surface. It was warm to the touch. His fingertips ran over one of the glyphs. And then suddenly there was an avalanche of information, a cascade of numbers. It was as if an enormous numerical code had been transferred directly into his mind. It was almost too much for the young sergeant, and then it stopped. And without warning, the craft lifted, elegantly and with no sound, straight up through the trees, and then described as suddenly gone, leaving that position at an immediate speed that should defy the laws of physics. The forest fell dark once more. No wreckage, no explanation. Just three shaken men standing in the middle of a cold forest, staring at a place where something had been. They returned to base. While the three airmen believed they were only gone around 30 to 45 minutes, the fourth man guarding the east gate said they had been gone for well over an hour. Reports were filed. Explanations were attempted, and the rest of the base laughed the story off. In the hours that followed, Burroughs had reported that his gums turned white and he felt ill, disorientated and confused, as though something had followed him out of the forest. Penniston could not get numbers out of his head, ones and zeros repeating themselves in different orders over and over again. By morning, the story was already beginning to change. What happened in Rendlesham Forest that night would not be investigated fully, not yet, because this was only the first night. Case 2. The second night. The morning following the incident, Jim Penniston returns to the site of the craft he said he saw. He took plaster of Paris with him and found a triangle of small indentations located between the trees, in the area he'd gone to just a few hours prior. The depressions formed a symmetrical triangle. There was also damage to the trees surrounding this triangle. There was damage to the upper branches, suggesting something had descended through the canopy. There were also burn marks found on nearby tree trunks, suggestive of some form of high-intensity heat or energy. The plaster casts of the three indentations were identical in the shape of an equilateral triangle on the forest floor. They were roughly 9.8 feet apart, forming a perfect triangle. While not disclosed at the time, at this point Jim Penniston began jotting down diagrams, symbols and binary code into his notebook. The local police constabulary had already been called out, who brushed the notion of strange lights off as those seen from Orford Ness Lighthouse. After 10:30 AM, after the impressions had been made casts of, the police were called out again. PC Brian Cresswell of the Suffolk Police examined the triangle marks with Captain Mike Verano. Again, the police dismissed this as marks being made by rabbits or squirrels. The integrity of the base was now being called into question, with several servicemen making light-hearted humour of the whole thing. On December 27, 1980, 2 nights after the first reported incident, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Hoult was attending an officers' dinner party at RAF Woodbridge. Lieutenant Bruce England entered with an urgent message for Hoult. "The UFO is back, sir." Reports of unidentified objects over the nuclear weapons storage area was making the rounds. A pragmatic character and leader, Hoult took this as an opportunity to put this talk of lights and spaceships to bed. Taking a tape recorder, a Geiger counter and a small military patrol group, it was Hoult's turn to venture into Rendlesham Forest, the early hours of December 28. Hoult stated that as they neared the area where the 3 indentations were made 2 nights previous, lights could be seen. Passing by the farmer's field, they saw what they described as an almost elliptical object with a black centre, like a giant winking red eye. This object was dripping as if made of molten metal, or energy discharges were coming off of it. As if it was shedding. This phenomenon was moving side to side, and then it came into the forest, bobbing and weaving, gracefully avoiding the trees. At one point it seemed as if it were following the team.
There's no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light ahead. It's yellow. I saw a yellow tinge in it too. Weird. It appears to be maybe moving a little bit this way. It's brighter than it has been. Yellow. It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way. Pieces of it are shooting off. There is no doubt about it. This is weird. To the left. Yeah, definitely moving left. Two lights. One light to the front, okay. One light to the left. Keep the flashlights off. There's something very, very strange.
Holt, trying to find logic in all of this, pondered if they were seeing ball lightning. As they approached, it retreated back into the farmer's field, and in an astonishing display, exploded into 5 white objects and then disappeared. The men pressed on, stumbling through a creek, and proceeded into the ploughed field. Looking up, they spied several objects in the sky, several in the north and several to the south. The objects in the north were described as changing from elliptical to round, with multicoloured lights strobing in the night sky. They were also observed at moving at high speeds, making sharp angular movements and suddenly stopping, like one would moving a handheld magnifying glass over a grid or map. Then one of the objects moved towards the party, approaching at high speed, about 2,000 to 4,000 feet in altitude. It almost seemed directly overhead and then stopped. An energy beam or laser, some sort of light source, came down from that object, short of about 8 feet from the men's feet. It was about 10 inches in diameter. Standing in awe, the men did not know what to make of this. Was it a warning? A signal? A probe? A type of communication? And then the beam was terminated and the object moved away. Other objects in the sky were now being observed doing the same thing. Thin beams of light shooting down from their positions. One of these objects was over the Woodbridge base, sending down similar beams. Whatever was said to have appeared over the skies of Bentwaters and Woodbridge in December 1980, Holt disclaimed. I found out later that British radar had actually picked up some things on a screen. I didn't know this until recently because people had come forward after they retired. There were 2 radar confirmations. Case 3. The Aftermath and Cover-Up. Colonel Holt decided to write up a report on the UFO incident and submitted it to Britain's Ministry of Defence. He sent this memorandum along with a covering letter from Donald Morland, the British liaison officer at the time. The memo was dated 13 January 1981, nearly a fortnight after the events described. There was no intention for this to be made for public viewing. The purpose was to prompt the Ministry of Defence into action to conduct a proper investigation where it was felt the local constabulary had failed. Holt later claimed that he relied on memory of the dates, explaining a discrepancy where he is out by 1 day for both nights. There is also another discrepancy with the radiations reported in the memo and what he stated on his recordings. Ultimately, the MOD made a scant investigation and no witnesses were ever interviewed. The whole thing was regarded as of little importance and no further official report was made or action taken by the UK or the US authorities. Colonel Holt has gone on record as saying that he believes he witnessed an extraterrestrial encounter, and the incident was subsequently hushed up by the US and UK governments, filing his memorandum away forever. Despite this, the memo was released under the US Freedom of Information Act in June 1983 by the US Air Force to Robert Todd of the group Citizens Against UFO Secrecy. While it cannot be stated for certain, it was likely that this was how the memorandum began circulating into the public sphere. Burroughs and Penniston, the first two witnesses, have suffered PTSD since that night. In the book Encounter in Rendlesham Forest, Penniston wrote, "I left that forest a different man. I was in awe of the technology and yes, and knowing that it was not an aircraft that could have been manufactured in 1980 or even today." Penniston stated that the craft he touched downloaded binary into his mind which would plague him even in his sleep and would only be assuaged by writing the code down in his notebook. John Burroughs entered the United States Air Force in 1979 and went on to serve 20 years. In spite of all this, Burroughs suffered a variety of health problems, most notably his heart, which he directly attributes to the incident in Rendlesham Forest. He also claimed on the night of the incident he experienced a variety of physiological effects, including temporary blindness and a ringing in his ears. The heart condition he was later diagnosed with, he states was caused by radiation on that night. After a long 30-year battle with the US government to receive full disability benefits by the US Department of Veteran Affairs, he finally underwent heart surgery in 2013 to correct the condition. The day after the night of the first incident, Jim Penniston said he started seeing ones and zeros in his mind's eye. Penniston wrote down this binary code he said he received in a small notebook, the same notebook that he also drew the craft and the individual hieroglyphs. The numbers were so vivid that Penniston said he could write them down with complete clarity, and once done, the unpleasant feeling in his head passed. The notebook is packed away and is not considered again until 2010. The numbers were later decoded by an expert and there is indeed a message. In short, the message translates to exploration of humanity, continuous for planetary advancement, eyes of your eyes, origin year 8100. There were also a series of locations within this message, namely the Pyramids of Giza in Egypt, Caracol in Belize, an ancient Mayan city, the Nazca Lines in Peru, Sedona in Arizona, Tai Shan Ku, a mountain in China, the Portara of Naxos in Greece, also known as the Great Door at the Temple of Apollo, and most interestingly, High Brazil, a legendary, almost mythical island set to line the Atlantic Ocean to the west of Ireland. Despite the island appearing on many ancient maps, the island itself does not physically exist today. The myth around the island being that it is cloaked in mist except for one day every 7 years where it becomes visible but is impossible to reach. Interestingly, while Colt believes that the objects were extraterrestrial in nature, Penniston believes that what they experienced were time travelers from the distant future. While John Burroughs, Jim Penniston and Charles Halt have become the most vocal of the witnesses, there were others. Airman First Class Edgar Banasang was patrolling with Burroughs on the first night, considered more cautious and grounded than his fellow witnesses. In his original witness statement, Gabanasang said the team did see a bright light in the forest, but as they moved closer, that the light was not deep within the forest but appeared to be from the farmhouse. He also said that he stayed nearer the vehicle while the other two went closer. Then there was Larry Warren, a young US Air Force security specialist. Considered by some to be the most controversial of all the witnesses, he co-authored a book titled Left at East Gate, recounting his experiences. Warren said he was part of the detail that went out with Halt on December 28. On that night, he claims to have seen a large triangular craft, roughly 20 feet across with a rounded top. Snow white in colour, silent but distorting in other colours. It was surrounded by military personnel. Warren also asserts that 3 humanoid figures emerged from that craft. They were 3 feet tall, large heads and dark eyes with bodies that seemed translucent or glowing. He felt they were communicating via telepathy with the personnel. He He said he also observed US military personnel and British police officers taking film and photography of the clearing. He also claims that personnel were debriefed by OSI agents, that all witnesses were discouraged from talking publicly, being told to sign altered statements, and that they were drugged, subjected to coercive interrogation methods, hypnotized, and even threatened. In the official record, the Office of Special Investigations did not launch a public investigation into UFOs connected to Rendlesham. There is no publicly released OSI document confirming interrogations with truth serum or drugs. Standard debriefings did occur, which was standard procedure for personnel involved in unusual or security-related events. Halt himself has said that Larry Warren did not attend his party on the night of his investigation. However, there were claims from later interviews, UFO community sources, and witness recollections that asserts that hypnosis and truth serum was used, such as Penniston being taken to an OSI building afterwards where he was administered sodium pentothal, which corroborates Warren's statements somewhat. Penniston has referred in later interviews to be taken to one side for a debriefing and that some kind of hypnosis was applied that affected his memory. However, this is something asserted years later and not in the original 1980 statement. In fact, no mention of a craft or binary codes were mentioned at the time of the incident. John Burroughs has said in many interviews that he was never drugged or hypnotized. He does express confusion and blames close proximity to the glowing object as being the result of his health ailments. Lieutenant Colonel Halt has never publicly stated that personnel were drugged as part of an official investigation. He does acknowledge that he felt witnesses were pressured not to talk about the incident. He did not confirm if they were chemically interrogated. Officially, while the United States Air Force did have OSI personnel on base around at the time of the incident, official statements from senior commanders at the time were that OSI were not engaged in a formal investigation into the sighting itself. Halt's boss, Colonel Ted Conrad, stated that no OSI investigations beyond regular debriefs had occurred. Unofficially, individuals connected to the incidents have claimed that OSI agents did talk to them and that they were instructed to sign sanitized statements, pressured not to discuss details publicly, and alleged some intimidation techniques were used. So, the reality looks like security personnel were debriefed after the incident as standard military procedure. Halt, Penniston and others gave official written and oral accounts. Halt filed a formal memo. There is no confirmed official OSI UFO interrogation documented in primary sources. There was no use of drugs, hypnosis or covert pressure as part of an informal testimony. So that should be it. Case closed? But the story is so fantastical, so monumental that there has to be something to it. You would think that trained military men would be able to tell the difference between a lighthouse and lights descending from the sky. While it might be convenient that certain witnesses come forward years later with supposed new information, and some witnesses stated that they likely saw the lighthouse like Gabbana sang, he and Burroughs did see something descend into the forest they believed to be a craft and went into the forest to a point where the light source was. While it could be possible to believe that one man could have made the event up, the fact that several witnesses, all trained men of military discipline, saw something, suggesting that something happened. There have been suggestions of the whole thing being a hoax, such as the SAS playing an elaborate prank. If that were the case, would this not be a more believable case to put forward other than nothing to see here? That is, of course, if there was a cover-up. For Burroughs to be given his disability benefit allowance on the basis of radiation poisoning almost seems like an admission in of itself. The story was big enough to become the front page news on the News of the World newspaper in 1983. Halt has said that in 2015 he had obtained written statements from radar operators at RAF Bentwaters and the nearby Rendlesham airfield that an unknown object was in fact tracked at the time of the incident. Hawke claims that it was only years later, after retiring from their roles, that they felt they could come forward. Apparently, they said the object crossed a distance of 60 miles in under 2 to 3 seconds. The craft would have to have been moving thousands of miles an hour to achieve that, and that they observed the object go to the forest where his team also went to. Books have been written, interviews have been told, and wild theories have been speculated within various interested communities. In 2005, due to the large interest in the UFO incident, the Forestry Commission, using lottery proceedings, created a public trail in Rendlesham Forest called the UFO Trail. The trail also features a model based on what United States Air Force personnel saw over those nights. For every witness that there has also been someone to try and rationalise what happened. From rabbit digging holes in the ground to the notion that a Russian satellite fell out the sky. But someone knows the truth, and it was always more than one person. Suffolk is home to rich folklore, and arguably the Rendlesham Forest incident is its greatest. But is it folklore or folk truth? Britain and much of the world has a long history of UFO going back hundreds of years. These have appeared in paintings such as the Crucifixion of Christ hanging in the Visoki Dekani Monastery in Kosovo, a painting made in 1350. Or the more well-known celestial phenomena over Basel 1566, which shows dozens of red and black circles, as well as a large black triangular object in the sky above a town. We could go back further to ancient Egyptian findings, or even cave paintings from 10,000 years ago. All of it is subjective, all of it a mystery to delve into another day. Thank you for listening to Mythic Albion. If you liked today's episode, leave a review and share. It helps others find their way back to real space and time. Whatever happened in Rendlesham Forest, metal craft, misidentified lights, or something stranger, one thing is certain: the men who walked into those woods carried something back with them, and they were never the same again. Not just stories or fear, but uncertainty. And uncertainty is where superstition lives. Because when we cannot explain a light in the sky, a shape in the dark, a voice in the trees, we reach for meaning. We always have. Long before UFOs, we blamed spirits. But before spirits, we blamed gods. Before gods, we blamed fate. Why do we avoid walking under ladders? Why do we knock on the wood? Why do we cross our fingers for luck? And why does a black cat in the road still make hearts skip, even in the age of satellites and space stations? And why, after thousands of years of progress, can a simple date on the calendar make people feel uneasy? Friday the 13th. A day some refuse to fly on, refuse to travel on, refuse to tempt fate. Is it coincidence, cultural memory, or a lingering belief we pretend we've outgrown? Because whether it's a glowing object in a forest or a number on a door, the unknown still grips us in the same ancient place. The part of us that whispers, "Be careful, something isn't right. Luck can turn." Next time on Mythic Albion, we step away from the skies and into the unseen forces people swear shape our lives. Good luck, bad luck, omens, signs, and the quiet rituals we perform without even knowing why. Because on this island, superstition never really left, it just changed clothes. So until next time, walk wisely, and beware that silent beam at night that appears on the path in front of you.